policy of January 9, 2023, the gentleman from California, Mr. Garcia, is recognized for the remainder of the 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my fellow naval aviator from Virginia for this precious time. Madam Speaker, today I rise as a former naval officer who is concerned for our enlisted troops, and particularly our junior enlisted troops within the Department of Defense, the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, the Marines, the Space Guardians. As a massive government rolls forward, spending more and more and gathering more and more debt, our enlisted troops continue to do the tough work of providing Americans their security blanket. Just last night, we had 9 Army soldiers killed in a tragic training accident in a Black Hawk helicopter outside of Kentucky. Such great sacrifices on a daily basis, and our enlisted folks are doing this work for almost no compensation. As I reflect on just how little our junior enlisted ranks earn, I'm left begging the question, Madam Speaker, who is providing them with their security? What lobbyist group is advocating for junior enlisted personnel who, when they first join the military, are making about $23,000 a year? Madam Speaker, I know you're familiar with this, having served your country, but this is a pay table from the DoD for FY23 showing what our enlisted troops make, and you can see when they first join, they're actually making less than $21,000 a year, and it's not until they're actually above an E3 with E4 rank over 4 years, 5 years, that they're actually above what we would consider minimum wage of $15 an hour or $32,000 a year. It's about $11 per hour what they're being paid right now for what would be a normal 40-hour work week. And in California, fast food workers start at $22 an hour. And oh, by the way, our troops, they're not usually working 40-hour work weeks. As you know, they're working 60 to 80 hours per week, especially if they're on deployment. And so I ask our fellow Americans and legislators to let that sink in. Let it sink in that the starting wage of a McDonald's worker is twice that of the starting wage of our junior enlisted troops. The McDonald's worker, however, doesn't get his hair shaved. He doesn't have some of his rights and freedoms taken away. The McDonald's worker doesn't go on deployments for 6 to 12 months at a time, and he doesn't put his life on the line for his beautiful country during both peacetime and training operations. And 22 McDonald's workers a day don't take their own lives by suicide each day. $11 per hour. That's what we pay our troops. A third of our troops, Madam Speaker, qualify for food stamps, and even China is paying their enlisted more than we are. So, Madam Speaker, who's making sure that our enlisted troops are getting the resources that they need to provide for their family? Not just the financial resources, but food, safe housing, daycare, schools for their children, and jobs for their spouses. The DoD officers, they have an organization called MOAA, or the Military Officers Association of America. The Pentagon has their top brass that come to the Hill and testify, asking to make sure that they get all the weapons they require to maintain the pointy edge of the spear. But the sad fact remains that the junior enlisted of our military remain largely unrepresented and without a champion. And we wonder why we suffer from record low recruitment, record low retention. Today's retention problem is tomorrow's recruiting crisis. And pay and quality of life are the biggest drivers right now in our challenges to retention. And members of Congress, I've seen it for several years from both sides of the aisle, have stood at these very podiums, thumping their chests, talking about the 3 to 5% pay raises, and they're taking care of our troops. They say, we're taking care of our troops. These are record high pay raises, they say. And I guarantee you that's going to happen again over the next several months. We're taking care of our troops. We're giving them record high pay. And it's a bunch of crap. Because in the midst of 7 to 8% inflation, and when your base pay is only $22,000 a year, a 5% increase is only about $90 a month. And that's easily swallowed up in your first trip to the gas station. So politicians can thump their chest and try to make themselves feel better about themselves, but don't stand here and tell us that you're taking care of the troops, because for far too long the welfare of our enlisted troops has gone without a shepherd in Congress, and without leadership in the Pentagon, and without a true champion. There's been freebie talking points that are easy to see, but they're being masked by anemic and hollow actions from flag officers and politicians the same. And that ends now, Madam Speaker. Last year, my military spouse bill passed both chambers of Congress and was signed into law by the President in January, and I'm grateful for that. It helped about 140,000 active duty families. This law requires all 50 states to recognize the professional licenses of active duty spouses. If they're a nurse, a teacher, real estate agent, cosmetologist, their licenses are now recognized across state lines when our active duty families get orders to a new state. And to our troops and their spouses throughout the nation, if you're currently having any pushback from credential boards or licensing boards in your state, wherever you're stationed, and they're not recognizing your license and you're the spouse of an active duty member, please call my office, work with your commanding officer, but call my office and we will help you to make sure that your rights are adhered to and honored, and that your license is honored as well. This is the law of the land, and you have rights now in this regard. Madam Speaker, I'm proud of that achievement from last session, but this session has to be focused on base pay, especially for our junior enlisted. I've introduced a bill that ensures that the DoD minimum base pay salary is $31,200. This figure gets an E1 up to parity with every other industry in the nation, where $15 per hour is the generally accepted minimum wage. This $31,200, it represents about a 50% increase to base pay for enlisted personnel. And while that may sound high, we have to remember how low the starting point is. And this will save us money by needing fewer recruitment bonuses and fewer retention bonuses after they join the military. Our nation's most precious asset, our most potent weapon, is our troops, the active duty men and women in uniform, and specifically the workhorses of our DoD forces, the enlisted personnel. We can have stealth bombers, nuclear submarines, intercontinental ballistic missiles, sexy fighter jets, hypersonic weapons, and the most advanced satellites up in space. But on our current recruitment and retention trajectory, we will still lose a war against a peer threat like China. And we will still lose a two-front war against near-peer adversaries. And with the most lethal arsenal in the world, we are still not secure unless we take care of our troops. And I will not stand at this podium or any other and feign support for big bills that provide small support for our troops. I won't do it. Our military, it begs for inspiration and for a mission. It craves leadership, and it thrives on patriotism. Our enlisted troops, they will literally climb mountains, they will move mountains, and they will give their life in defense of our way of life. But they won't complain about their pay because they are noble warriors, they are humble warriors. And as a nation, we must reestablish our dominance on the global stage, a position, frankly, that we lost in the wake of the Afghanistan debacle. The gap between our troops and their civilian counterparts right now is at an all-time high. All the while, China has closed the gap against the United States in several domains. We need some wins under our belt when it comes to national security and readiness and taking care of our troops. And the men and women in fancy suits in this chamber and in the chamber just 600 feet north of here, they need to do the right thing for our troops wearing the military uniforms, not in 5 years, not in 1 year, but this year. And the Commander-in-Chief, just 1.6 miles to the west, should support us in this endeavor, and I'm willing to provide him the tools necessary to do it myself if needed. But $31,000 is a doable due for base pay for our enlisted, and it's necessary. It's imperative that as we craft the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, and also write the defense appropriation bills, a committee that I sit on, that we are adequately addressing the pay and the welfare of our troops, and that we do so very soon this year. I commit to our enlisted personnel that I will remain your champion in Congress until we get this right. Your nation has forgotten you and neglected you for too long, and that ends this year. God bless our troops, and with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.